and welcome on back for another episode of the Fourth and 30 podcast. As you can see, one of our four is not able to make it this week. Carl and his family made a trip back to see some family in Missouri, so he's a little tied up right now. We'll try and keep the show as light and witty as it would be without him. Um, so last week we had a lot that happened in the NFL. Raiders stayed undefeated. Cowboys and Titans were able to bounce back and get big victories for them. But I'd say the talk of the town around here right now is the Ravens and Lamar Jackson getting their first ever win against the Patrick Mahomes led Chiefs. Kyler, what do you think that means for the Chiefs? What do you think that means for the Ravens? How big of a deal is this victory?
Um, I think as the Ravens, you were happy to steal that win. I still don't know how confident the Ravens are right now with the way their defense is playing. Now, granted, they have played Derek Carr, who's on fire. They've played Patrick Mahomes. You know what he brings. Um, but they're missing a lot of people. And I think the Ravens are just trying to weather the storm until they can figure out an identity on defense, figure out what they want to do. We know their offense is going to score points with Lamar Jackson. So I think the Ravens are just very happy to steal that win. Now, as for the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs organization, Chiefs fans should be kind of worried about their defense. They've given up 480 yards a game so far. Now it's only week 2. There's a long ways to go. And when you're thinking about the state of your team or state of the NFL, it's week 2. There's a lot of 1-1 teams. How you look right now is not how you're going to look at the end of the year. So everybody has things they need to work on, and nobody's hitting the panic button just yet. But I think the Chiefs are looking at their defense, thinking we need to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, they'll come around. They're not going to get any worse. It's hard to look much worse than they did against the Ravens. That game was more so of a show of the Ravens. The Ravens have been really good since Lamar Jackson took over. And the Chiefs have had their number for 3 years now, but that team's good. The Chiefs at times make them look not as good as they really are. But they're one of the deadliest running teams in the NFL, no matter who their running back is. I mean, they've got guys who they didn't plan on getting any carries this year, being their RB1 and RB2 this year, and they're still making it look easy. Now the Chiefs make it look easier on teams than it really is against other better defenses. But the Ravens will be just fine. Lamar Jackson's such a threat that no matter who's in the backfield behind him, the defense has to keep their eyes on Lamar Jackson. I think it's probably just a good thing the Ravens don't have a top-tier running back. And as for the Chiefs, they don't need to hit the panic button at all. They're still the Chiefs. They're still good. Offense is still scoring points. They've got to figure out something on defense. But there's no need to hit the panic buttons. The Ravens are a good team. I mean, they're another AFC North team who's probably playoff bound. And the Chiefs just lost a good game. I mean, that's all there is to it. We're not going to go 17-0 every year like people hope so. So no, Ravens should be happy. The Chiefs be like, oh, we lost one, we got beat. Simple as that. Wasn't playoff time, so.
Yeah, I tend to agree with most of what you guys are saying. Chiefs have given up the most rushing yards in the NFL so far this year, and it's not close. They've also played the Ravens and the Browns, who are probably two of the best.
The two
Five,
best rushing
yeah,
teams.
they're
They
probably
are
two
the
of the
two
best few
best.
rushing teams in the league. Not every team is going to be able to run the ball every down and keep up with the Chiefs' offense. It's not going to happen. And another thing I thought was interesting, I saw in a clip. It was actually a radio show here in Kansas City that was talking about it. Everyone always talks about how hard it is to win back-to-back Super Bowls because everyone when you're on their schedule, you're their Super Bowl. Did you guys see the post game um, when he was in the locker room talking to the team, how hyped the team was and how big he said that win was, and he was just going on and on about it. The Chiefs play 17 teams, 17 other team or 17 games worth the other team's Super Bowl this year.
Yep.
You just can't get a team that hyped every single week. It's not possible. I understand the Chiefs did win the Super Bowl, but they're still considered the class of the AFC.
Yeah.
Um, and every team is hyped to play them. It's not possible to get that hyped 17 times. They're not as hyped as the other team's going to be to play. It's just not possible. The Ravens exploited the Chiefs' weaknesses. The Chiefs still move the ball. Like they played 2 playoff teams, they're 1-1, and it took a late game fumble to beat them. I mean, I their run defense is a problem, obviously, but they're gonna be in every game with their offense.
Yeah,
It's
It could come back to
I
bite them
made that
eventually, but
comment. What you just said about the way the Ravens were celebrating, that was a big game for the Ravens. The Ravens are an elite tier team, and they haven't been able to get past the Chiefs. They had every right to celebrate like that. But I made the comment watching the game. I said, "Look, Lamar Jackson looks like he just won a national championship or a Super Bowl." So they had every reason to be hyped up. But if the Chiefs would have won that game, they would have just shook hands and walked off the field, and probably didn't even nobody probably would have even got an ice water bath. So, it's just, I mean, hats off to the Ravens. That's all I can say. They played well. They won the game.
they
But
did.
there was a little more on the line for them than it was for the Chiefs.
it's actually, this just the state of the NFL right now. After week 2, there's a lot of 1-1 teams, and there's a lot of good teams in the NFL that can beat you any day. I can only think of maybe a handful of teams that, if that you go up against, that you feel pretty good about your chances of winning. So I mean, it's week 3 is going to be going down the road. You're going to see teams evolve. You're going to see teams get better. Some teams are going to get worse, but there's a lot of parity in the NFL this year,
Yeah,
and
and
I think more so than normal.
yeah, you're right. There's a lot of good teams scattered out through the AFC and the NFC. Should be interesting. Not to jump ahead to week, but you saying that about the 1-1 teams or the 2-0 teams that we've had a little discussion in our group chat today about people are maybe overrating them a little bit, even though they're 2-0. Is that week 3 looks like there's a lot of good games. We were talking last week. We came up with 4 games for our eliminator picks without telling each other, but we all kind of agreed there was 4, maybe 5 games in there. Like, oh, those are all pretty safe eliminator picks. I just stared at week 3 schedule for about 15 minutes and had a hard time finding 1 to 2 of them to pick. So I think there's going to be a lot of good games. They probably won't all end up being great games, but there's a lot of good matchups on the schedule. But back to week 2, there was a lot of good games.
Yeah, I would say, one game, obviously, Chiefs fans had their eyes on, and Kyler, the Steelers were playing, and the Steelers Raiders game. 2 1-0 teams. Raiders are now 2-0. First time they've been 2-0, I think, since 2016 when they had that breakout year. What'd you guys take away from that game?
Derek Carr
Well,
is a man on a mission, right? He is balling, and I know we've talked about this before too. I think everyone in here gives uh, Derek Carr due respect for how capable he is being in a Raiders organization that's pretty dysfunctional. Um, but he looks like he's out to prove something this year. I don't know why this year is the year that he's playing out of his mind, but he is. I mean, that's all there is. He's playing phenomenal. Steelers a little banged up, couldn't really move the ball a whole lot, but the Raiders look really good. I thought they were going to be improved from last year, but the way they look going into week 3 is way better than I thought they were going to look.
so couple things on this game. First off, if you're the Steelers, after the way you finished last year, when you couldn't run the ball, the whole offseason it was, we're going to get back to running the football. How many carries did Harris have? 10 carries for 40 yards. And if you stick with the run and keep running the ball, he might break one. It's running backs that average 5 yards a carry don't just get 5 yards every carry. There's carries where they have 1 or 2 yards. It blew my mind that the Steelers threw the ball as much as they did against that pass rush and didn't stick with the ground game. It was a close game the whole way. And that kind of blew my mind. The Steelers need to stick with running the ball. You drafted a running back in the first round for this. Your O-line is restructured for this. You can't give up after 10 carries for 40 yards, first off. Second off, what's that do? Big Ben got pressure against the Raiders have a good pass rush. They've proved it through 2 games now. And Big Ben was knocked down 11 times. Now he's hurt. He will not make it through a full season like that. They have to stick with the ground game. And secondly, for the Raiders, offensively, Derek Carr is a stud. However, I don't know if they can live like that all season because, let's face it, the Steelers were down to their 4th and 5th pass rushers for 3/4 of that game. Weren't getting a pass rush, playing zone defense. Yes, Derek Carr picked them apart. But when you go up, against the heavyweights, I don't know if that'll be enough. So I look for the Raiders to try to. Josh Jacobs was out, so that could have just been a one game plan kind of deal. But Derek Carr deserves his credit. Those receivers deserve their credit. They've got Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Brian Edwards are a pretty solid 2 receiver tight end combo. So I'm not completely sold on the Raiders being contenders yet because we know what they've done in the past, but they're getting closer.
Yeah, I think you guys touched a little bit on all of it. Derek Carr he's leading the league in passing yards after 2 games. He's had 2 good games. I don't know that with Jacobs back, they'll rely much on the run though. They've kind of went to that. They've kind of tried to mimic the Chiefs the last couple years as far as spreading the ball out, the way they've played. I think the thing that people are missing though, the biggest difference is the Raiders were like the 27th ranked defense last year. And I saw a stat. Derek Carr threw 1 touchdown pass last year while leading. He threw 2 in the first game. Like their defense just as soon as the Raiders would score, their defense would give up more points. And the Raiders defense has looked a lot better through the first couple games. I don't think they'll finish top 10 or anything, but if they're a top 15, top 20 defense, with that offense, the weapons they have, I think they're capable of making noise. I wouldn't say as far as Super Bowl contenders or anything like that, but them and the Chargers, I think, in that division, could be fighting for a playoff spot, wild card spot at the end of the year. What other good games we have?
I wanted to touch on that. I was waiting for you guys to both talk about Steelers Raiders. Segue into week 1, the Steelers had a great big win over Buffalo, who's my Super Bowl favorite, and I think a lot of people's favorites too, or maybe not favorites, but they're high on the Bills this year. Bills could be elite this year. And then the Steelers beat them, which was a good showing for the Steelers. And then the Bills came back and smacked the Dolphins, who is a fringe playoff team, probably on the outside looking in. But that was your 4th and 30 podcast, Stone Cold Pick of the Century of the Week last week. But
2-0.
The Bills looked really good against the Dolphins. Really, really good. That's scary for the rest of the league. They didn't allow a point, scored 35, looked a lot better than they did against the Steelers. So, the Bills might have just had a hiccup week 1 and are hitting stride now.
Yeah, the Bills look good. The Dolphins also looked horrible.
Yes, they did.
Tua went down. Jacoby Brissett came in, and they didn't move the ball with either of them, honestly. And the Bills defense might be better this year, but last year they were atrocious.
So last year the Bills defense was good down the stretch. They had a lot of injuries throughout early in the year last year, and they were better down the stretch. However, the big thing for me about the Bills is the Steelers blitzed 4 and dropped into zone against them every time. Josh Allen struggled. The Miami doesn't play like that. Miami will blitz you. They will line up in man coverage because they have good cornerbacks. I think the Bills can overcome it, but the Steelers might have found something against the Bills on how to defend Josh Allen. Now, Allen's an elite athlete and he will figure it out, but that is kind of their kryptonite when you drop 7 in the zone and blitz 4.
So if you're able to do that, I agree with what you're saying.
There's not many teams able to do that.
Exactly. That people say that about the Chiefs over and over because Mahomes' biggest struggle is when you blitz 4 and can get to him and can drop 7 guys. The problem is most teams can't blitz 4 and get to the quarterback consistently.
Eventually, you're going to run into a team that can do that. Eventually.
Yeah, it's fair enough. But yeah, the Bills did look better. Dolphins coming off that win against the Patriots had to be very deflating to get beat down that bad by who most presumed to be their division winner. Speaking of the Patriots, they bounced back and got a big win this week. Cowboys bounced back and got a big win this week. What did you guys think of the Cowboys-Chargers game?
Good game. Damn good game. Justin Herbert made a young guy mistake at the end of the game. And Cowboys iced it with a field goal. Two potential playoff teams. It looks more and more like the Chargers are going to be back and forth with the Raiders for a wild card spot.
The Broncos too, though. But, we came into this season saying the AFC North was the best division in the AFC. That might not be true. It's still we still have time to figure that out, but AFC West has looked pretty strong so far.
Yeah.
It has. And the
So
Washington football team and Giants game was. You guys go ahead and talk about Chargers Cowboys.
So one thing I took away from the Chargers Cowboys, so after week one, Dak threw the ball over the field, had like almost 400 yards passing. Everyone said the Cowboys are going to leave the running game behind. And then the Cowboys come out and run for 198 yards as a team against the Chargers. Chargers run defense has been suspect at best these first 2 weeks. They've allowed the second most rushing yards behind the Chiefs. Um, Herbert threw 2 picks. Young quarterback made a couple mistakes. Um, I I mean, but the Cowboys' ability to run the ball in that game and the lack of the 2 mistakes made by Herbert were honestly the difference in the game.
To me, watching that game, it was a matchup of two teams that are good teams, but not great yet. Like both these teams have a little bit ways to go, and I think both teams can get there. But if you're the Chargers, I mean, you're moving the ball up and down the field. You're averaging 450 yards a game, and you're averaging 18 points. That's not going to get it done. So they need to get better in the red zone. And the Cowboys, you know, Cowboys just need to find their identity. Are they going to be a passing team? Or are they going to be a running team? I think I said it a couple weeks after the Thursday night game. The year the Cowboys were a great team, they were running the ball, play action. I still think that's their way to winning a Super Bowl. I don't think Dak's a guy that's going to drop back and throw it 40 times and win you a Super Bowl. So I look for them to, get back to running the ball like they did this week.
In
And
order for a play action to be successful, though, what do you have to do? Or I should say, what has to be a
Run the
threat?
ball well.
The run has to be a
Run
threat, and when they just don't give it to Zeke enough times, teams aren't gonna. I agree, Kai, that they need to be a play action team, but they're
So
actually going to have to start running the ball for that to work.
one thing I was gonna say about that, and I think last week they did. They had 31 carries as a team.
yeah,
But one thing I was gonna say about that is week one, everyone was saying, "Give the ball to Zeke, give the ball to Zeke, give the ball to Zeke." Is there a new running back in Dallas?
It,
Pollard ran the ball 13 times. Zeke ran at 16. Pollard had over 100 yards rushing. Zeke had 71 yards rushing.
in Zeke's absence last year, right? Was it last year or 2 years ago?
it was
I don't think he's missed substantial
Pollard
time.
got a
Yeah,
lot of carries.
he's
It was probably last year then. Pollard, got a lot of carries, and he looks good when he gets his carries.
I
They're
think
paying Zeke an awful lot of money to be an RB2, but
I mean, when you got Zeke, who's obviously a good running back, you use him. But Tony Pollard's obviously good too. But they're also they complement each other because Tony Pollard's more of a outside the tackle, explosive runner. Zeke can handle the dirty work inside. So yeah, you're going to see Pollard average more yards per carry, and I think it's what
Zeke
they
will beat up the
should do. Yeah,
defense, and
divvy
then
up the duties, keep them
Pollard will
both
break the big
fresh.
ones.
Yeah, and that's a good combo there that they have.
Another thing, going back to that Giants football team, because these two teams both related. We expected the Cowboys and Giants to have two of the top 5 running backs in the NFL, and neither one of them, Zeke or Saquon, have been impressive the first couple weeks. Um, what were you gonna say, Kyler?
Saquon's is more of a usage thing and how they're limiting him coming back from his knee injury. I mean, Thursday night when he got the ball, he looked like Saquon. I think it's fair to say after this week and a half break that they're going to start unleashing Saquon.
Yeah, that's a game the Giants should have won. Um, I don't as a Chiefs fan, you know what it's like, the offsides penalty.
Daniel
That'll forever
Jones,
haunt me. That game I was at, we were offsides on Brady's interception was the worst single play I've ever been watched anything. But how are you offsides on a game-winning field goal? I don't understand.
Daniel Jones looks good.
yep.
Daniel
I was getting
Jones,
ready to say that.
he looks good. I
I
mean,
was
this guy's turning it around. And yeah, they
He
didn't
looks
win that
better.
game, but it was at Washington. They didn't necessarily have to. It was still an encouraging game for the New York Giants in
And
my
uh
eyes.
and even though they won, I don't think it's a good game for Washington.
I
Washington
don't
looks like
either.
they're taking strides back.
um a lot of the misconceptions about Daniel Jones is if you go to YouTube and type in Daniel Jones, the first thing that comes up is him botching that long run where he trips over the 20-yard
The
line and
yard
falls
line.
down. And that's not the case. Danny Dimes has wheels. He can run. It's not pretty. He doesn't run as smooth as Lamar or Josh Allen or some of those guys, but he's capable. He's got wheels. And
He's an
he's been
athlete.
and
I
he's
think the biggest knock on him has been his inability to take care of the football, though. More
yeah.
interceptions than games, or more turnovers than games played in his career.
Yeah, but he's looking better, I would say. I think I put him in the dog water tier. And
I
I
definitely
might stand corrected, but
There's another quarterback you might have to stand corrected on too. How about them Panthers just destroying the Saints? Carl's been high on the Saints, and the Panthers look good, and the Saints did not look good
hmm,
last week.
yeah, I don't know what to say. It's the same situation as the Broncos in that I think they'll cool off and Darnold will go back to being Sam Darnold, but never know. I mean, maybe the the Jets franchise is the best way to put it. Maybe it was just the Jets franchise. I don't know, but he does look good so far.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time believing that Darnold's that much better than Bridgewater. I do think that the Panthers will come back down to reality a little bit. I wouldn't put them up there with any of the top tier teams. As for the Saints, they're a classic case of right now. I feel like you're never as good as you look, and you're never as bad as you look. Week 1, they look like the best team in the NFL. Week 2, they look like one of the worst. I think they're somewhere in the middle, and I think you'll see that even out over time. If they're not running the ball, they're going to struggle on offense. That's that's about all there is to it. When you let
I
Jameis
agree.
loose, he's going to throw some interceptions. So I think they're keeping a leash on him, and they kind of need that run game to work.
I agree with they're not as good as they look. They're not as bad as they look. But like week 1, they didn't have to do anything on offense. They had short fields. Their offense really hasn't shown anything. They had like 140 yards passing and 70 yards rushing or something like that week 1, and they scored 35 points. Like, the points were pretty much handed to them. Their offense is gonna have to make some improvements if they wanna be a contender in the NFC, I think.
One of the better games I thought was one of the best games of the weekend was the Titans Seahawks. Seahawks were up 24-9 at half. Titans are 0-1. They just got beat pretty good at home by the Cardinals. I thought that was a great second half comeback from the Titans, but I also think it's concerning for the Seahawks because the Seahawks kind of did this thing last year, and I always feel like Seahawks are a little bit overrated, and I'm kind of worried about the Seahawks allowing the Titans to come back in that game. Credit the Titans. Derrick Henry got going. Once Derrick Henry gets going, that offense gets going. And it sure to me again, it's two 1-1 teams now that have some growing to do. They're both good teams, not great. And it's gonna be up to how they improve throughout the year.
Every year we do
Yeah,
this
that
thing where it's like, is King Henry still the king? Is he the best running back in the NFL? Does he still have it? Is there any wear and tear on him for being such a high usage guy? After week 1, he didn't have a King Henry type game. He was fine, but he didn't do a whole lot. And then week 2, he comes out and silences everyone. 35 carries, 182 yards, 3 TDs. That's a little over 5 yards per carry. And removed all doubt, in my opinion, that he's still the king of the NFL when it comes to running the ball. And that was just a huge comeback. That's hard to do being a run heavy team as the Titans and coming back from
15.
15 points at half. That's
Yep.
pretty hard to do winning it
But
in OT.
it was a complete offensive effort. Henry had 182 yards rushing. Tannehill had 347 yards passing. Julio Jones looked great. The Titans defense still looks terrible. The Seahawks still look like a one-dimensional team, and that one dimension is Russ. Like, I don't know. The Seahawks defense is so-so. The run game is terrible. They have Tyler Lockett. I don't know. I don't. They just have relied on Russ for the last 5 years to keep him relevant in my eyes.
I mean,
Um,
eventually people are going to stop leaving Tyler Lockett wide open downfield. Eventually. I mean, if you
well,
look at the
after
Seahawks
Russ's scramble for 14 seconds, it's hard to guard a guy for that long.
I I mean, there was 2 plays in that game where Lockett or another receiver was 15 yards behind the Titans defense. And those big plays are great and all, but I mean, eventually, like last year, defenses are going to start stopping that. They're not going to have breakdowns like that.
Yeah. So, we went through a lot of last week. What games are you guys looking forward to coming up this week?
Obviously, there's one for me. I will be there. First ever NFL, or not first ever NFL game, first ever Chiefs game for me. Chiefs
I didn't
Chargers,
know that.
2 1-1 teams at Arrowhead Stadium. I will be there live and in person. That's the game of the week for me, obviously, because I'll be there. But obviously, that's a big game, too. Because one of those 2 teams in that division is going to go 1-2. So it's a big game for both teams. It'll be a shootout, I think. The Chargers aren't a huge run team. They use Eckler pretty well. They may look to use him a lot more against the Chiefs, being the Chiefs have such a hard time stopping the run. But if it turns into a shootout and we get to see Herbert and Mahomes go back and forth, it's going to be a hell of a game.
Yeah, it's funny because those are 2 of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and I expect it to be a very, very pass-heavy game. The Chargers may, like you said, lean on the run a little bit more just because of the problems the Chiefs have had, but the way Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and it has nothing to do with his fumble, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not looked good the first 2 weeks for the Chiefs at all. Um, so I don't expect the Chiefs to try and run any more than they normally would. I expect it to be a pass-heavy game for them, regardless of how the Chargers' run defense has been. But yeah, I expect that to be a shootout and a fun game. Hopefully, the Chiefs won't come out 1-2.
I was
Yeah,
wrong. Oh, go ahead, Kai, if you want to talk Chargers.
both these teams do give up the run, but neither team's going to stray away from their identity of throwing the ball. This should be an offense. If you like offensive games, tune into this one. It's going to be high scoring. I don't see where even though it's a division game, I still have the Chiefs heavily favored, which most people do. But just due to the fact that the Chargers aren't finishing drives, and the Chiefs are going to. The Chiefs are going to score 30 points. This test will be the Chargers need to finish drives this week if they want to stay in this game.
So
Yeah, scoring 17 like last week won't be enough.
yeah, I think that's 2 of our 3 games of the week, just because division game at Arrowhead. But I think there's a clear-cut powerhouse game of the week.
I was wondering
Everybody
what you were going to
agree.
say. Bucks Rams.
Bucks
That'll
Rams.
be a fun game,
The primacy of the NFC is what's on the line right now.
especially in our power rankings. Those are 2 of the top. Oh, those are the top 2 teams right now.
Yeah. So it'll be an exciting one.
Battle for number 1.
And one of us has had Rams at number 1 ever since the preseason, and that's me. And
Here he is
FPI
in week 3 bragging about it.
FPI actually predicts that the Rams have a 56% chance to win this game, and here's why. See, here's the difference between this game and the Chargers-Rams game. The Chargers-Chiefs game. The Rams actually have not been great against the run this year so far. It's only 2 games, but they are very good against the pass and getting a pass rush. So the over-under on this 55, I expect that to be under. Just due to the fact that I think the Buccaneers will try to protect Tom Brady here. I think they'll try to establish the run. We know the Rams are going to run the ball and do play action. But it's definitely an exciting game, and we're going to see what wins out here, and if Stafford can come through in the fourth quarter. Should be a close game. But I'm excited to see Stafford in his first real competitive test here in the Rams.
Yeah, it'll be a fun game. One thing, the Bucks defense hasn't looked as good as most people expected the first 2 weeks. So we'll see how that looks in week 3. They gave up some points against the Falcons and the Cowboys. The Falcons was a little bit of garbage time, but also the Falcons were moving the ball in the first half against
It was
them
a
pretty
3-point
well.
game in the beginning of the fourth quarter. That
Yeah,
game was.
yeah, but then the Bucks pulled away and then the Falcons scored again.
2 batted
But
balls
yeah, it was
turned into 2 pick sixes,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. So, yeah, the Bucks defense has not looked as good as most people expected. So that'll be interesting to see how the Rams do against them. See if Cooper Cup can have like 6 touchdowns the way he's playing right now. Um,
Bengals
so
Steelers division game. Were you getting
yeah,
ready
I
to switch
mean, I
topics or
the
switch
no, no,
games?
no, 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 you're good. The Steelers should win that, I think, but with all the injuries they have, man, the defense already getting banged up. Roethlisberger's already banged up.
And the Bengals look better than I thought they would. I thought they would win 4 or 5 games. That's a tough division to win a whole lot of games in, being the bottom of it. Bengals haven't looked bad. The Steelers are up right now. Bengals can get an early lead, and force throw a lot. It could be an upset alert game, but I think this.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's the biggest thing is the Steelers' offense just hasn't looked very good. The first 2 weeks they have not looked great by any means, and if their defense is banged up and the Bengals can stay in it, that's the biggest thing. If they can score some points.
So the big thing in this game to me is, I mean, the Bengals have played the Vikings and the Bears. The Vikings are pretty good offensively. The Bears are not. So you have one. They've played one team that's pretty good, and they are second against the run, and they're seventh against the pass. So that is concerning for the Steelers. It looks like Big Ben's not going to practice all week, but he most likely will play. Um, but like I said when we were talking about Steelers Raiders, they've got to run the ball. Stick with the run. Look what the take a page out of the Tennessee Titans playbook. Derrick Henry didn't do anything for a game and a half. And then they stuck with it. They gave him the ball 35 times. Defenses get worn out. That's what the Steelers need to become. They need to not give up on the run so quick. And I think after last week, they watch film, I think they will. But this is definitely, the Steelers are favored by 3. They were 6-point favorites until Big Ben, the question of him playing happened. But this is definitely a toss-up kind of game. TJ Watt was limited in practice today, which is a good sign because limited on Wednesday, first day of practice,
Yeah,
probably means you have a good chance of playing. Joe
He'll be
Hayden
there.
was the same way. So those are good signs for their defense. But this is going to be a tough game.
Are there any more games you guys want to touch on? Because I'm gonna go into the next part. If not,
49ers Packers.
Yeah.
all right. So 49ers Packers. The 49ers off to a 2-0 start, but I don't know if anyone would say they've been overly impressive in their 2-0 start. They were up on the Lions, but the Lions came back. And then the Eagles, I guess the Eagles might be better than we think, but didn't look overly impressive in that game either. And the Packers obviously struggled week 1. That Lions game last week was a little closer than the score on Monday night. What are you guys taking away from that game?
Week. I think we can all agree that week 1 was a little bit of a fluke. So I'm taking the Packers, and I definitely hope they win because I don't want the Steelers to have to go to Green Bay after they're coming off a loss. But I just don't think I trust Jimmy G to put up enough points if their defense is giving up that many yards to a Packers offense.
Yeah, I actually have the Packers in this one too. The 49ers are 3.5 point favorites in this one. Um, but I'm kind of the same thing. The 49ers just their offense is an offense that does better when their defense isn't allowing 35 points. They can't get in shootouts with teams and they aren't going to come back against teams. I expect the Packers to score a lot of points in this game and the 49ers not to be able to catch up.
I'm the same way. I'm not. I could just as easily see the Packers winning as I could the Niners. It really depends on how the Niners defense plays, like you guys said. They can be a little better, a little more like last year and the year before. They'll be all right in this game. But if they don't play well and the Packers come out and score early, it could get ugly.
Yeah, and yeah, we say that the 49ers only gave up 11 points last week, but that was to the Eagles, and they gave up chunks of yards. You do that to the Packers, and the Packers turn those into points. So
So I kind of said this in the group chat. I had a thing I wanted to do. They were talking about it on ESPN earlier. That's what brought it to my attention. Who do you guys think is the worst 2-0 team right now? You have the Panthers at 2-0. You have the Cardinals at 2-0. You have the Broncos at 2-0. You have the Raiders, the Bucks, the Rams, the 49ers, and that's it. Who do you think's the worst 2-0 team?
Well, we know if our Facebook audience watches this episode, it's gonna piss them off bad. But I think the Broncos are the worst 2-0 team. I don't think the Panthers are far behind them, but I just don't believe in the Broncos.
I mean, it's definitely the Broncos or the Panthers. Those are the two teams that stick out off the page at you. The Panthers' schedule is super easy, so they might continue to ride that for a while. But yeah, to me, it's definitely either the Broncos or the Panthers, and I think they're pretty close as far as
Yeah, I think those are the two obvious teams there. I kind of agree with you. I think the Broncos will finish with the worst record of the two just because of how the AFC West is playing right now. And I put in our group chat the Panthers' easy schedule they have coming up. I think we said that the Panthers could be potentially 6-2 or 7-1
Yeah.
if they win the games they have a good
I
chance
mean,
of
there's a
winning.
shot. It won't
Um,
happen, but there's a shot at 8-0 with that schedule. It won't. They
yeah,
won't get there, but they
yeah,
have.
I think it'd be hard to say plan on the Panthers being 8-0, but yeah, I get what
But
you're
they have.
saying.
They have
It's a very
six
big
winnable
schedule.
games in a row at
Yeah,
starting 2 and
they
0.
do.
I think the
And
Cowboys is the best team they play during that stretch.
yeah, the Cowboys are the best team. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you guys, who's the best 0-2 team? You have the Lions, the Colts, the Falcons, the Giants, the Jaguars, the
Easy.
Jets, um, the Vikings.
Well,
So who do
again,
you
there's
think is
two
the
teams that jump off the page, but to me, it's the Vikings. I mean, yeah, they lost at week 1 at Cincinnati in overtime, but then they went to Arizona. They've lost 2 road games. Keep that in mind. And they had a chance to win, and their defense played pretty good in the second half of that game. And if there's an 0-2 team that's going to make the playoffs, to me, it's the Vikings. Just due to the fact that they've lost 2 road games, the Colts have lost 2 home games, and their offense is good. Their offense is legit. They're moving the ball, and their defense showed signs of life against the Cardinals in that second half. So to me, it's the Vikings.
Yeah, two teams jump off the page to me. The Colts is one. I think the Colts are fringe of winning that division. Maybe not as much as the Titans looked, and they're starting 0, but it's only a 1 game difference, 2 games into or 2 weeks into the. But when you break it down by point differential, the teams outside the Vikings have lost by a total of 26, 26, 49, 24, 15, and 15. Pretty convincing for all the other teams. The Vikings have lost 2 games by a combined 4 points. That's as close as you can be to winning games, so they'll be fine.
Yeah,
It's a bummer to
I
lose 2 games by that minimal of a margin, but they're
and
there.
what's even worse for the Vikings is I was looking at this earlier. They play the NFC West this year, so they still have to play the Seahawks, the Rams, the
Cardinals
wait,
and
the
Niners.
car no, they just lost the
Oh
Cardinals
yeah, they
and the
just lost
Niners. They still have the Seahawks, Rams, and Niners still coming this year, and the AFC North.
And
So
they
the
played the
Steelers,
worst team in
Ravens,
the AFC North
yeah,
already.
and maybe the worst team in the NFC West. You don't know that division. Like that division, any team could be the worst at this point. They're all so good.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
being the
any of those.
worst in that division is not a bad thing at all.
But what I'm saying is they still have 3 more teams
Yeah,
that are as good as the team
exactly.
they've already played.
The Packers also have to play those teams, though.
Yeah,
And
that's
if there's
fine.
anybody that's going to rival the Packers, I think we can all agree it's probably the Vikings. And the Packers also have to play the other division winners.
So,
And
going back oh, sorry, go ahead.
and you got to think, talking NFC North, the Bears have to start Justin Fields now until Andy Dalton gets healthy, so they're not in very good shape either. They're on their second string quarterback, young guy who's not ready to play yet in the NFL. Um, but
So, going back to this
once the red rifle gets back, they'll be okay.
so going back to those 2-0 teams, we did this last week, only because I brought it up randomly. How many 3-0 teams will we have after this week? You got the Panthers playing the Texans at Houston.
Texans are playing well. I don't think that's a lock.
I'm saying
So
yes to
yes
the
or no? You
Panthers.
think that? I think the Panthers. I think it'll be a close game. I think I would take the Panthers, but I think it'll be a good game.
Majority rules then 3-0.
Okay. You got the Cardinals at the Jaguars. That's
There's
2.
another. There's
That's
two.
2.
The Jets at the Broncos.
That's 3.
How do the Broncos start with the Giants, the Jaguars, and the Jets? That's 3 of the
That's
worst 4 or
fortunate.
5 teams in the NFL. The Dolphins at the Raiders.
That's 4.
I'm gonna
2
go with
is out.
Vegas.
2 is out.
I think that's Vegas too. The Bucks at the Rams. One of them will be undefeated. Doesn't matter who you pick.
So 5.
5. Packers at Niners. We both already said we're taking the Packers in that game. And
That
that's
leaves
it.
that's 5.
So we'll leave 5 undefeated teams after
We're
this
saying
week.
5, but there's always a team that loses, and I think
But
that's
there
the
could be a
Panthers.
team that wins that we
Vegas.
don't
Vegas.
expect to.
Bucks or Rams. Said yes to the Broncos. Cardinals, Panthers. Yeah, you're right. 5. I can't count.
It's that North Shelby man.
I know. Shut up.
Teacher.
So the only thing I have really left is our eliminator picks. Obviously we can't get Carl's. Do you guys want to lock yours in on here? Or?
I'll lock mine in. And I'm going to go
All right.
first just so I don't get the, oh, he was waiting for everybody else to pick. I'm going Browns. Lock it in.
Okay. Browns it is. Kyler, who are you going?
Well, unfortunately, I've already used the Browns. And my pick
If
is
you're not ready,
No, I'm ready. And I'm just kind of hesitant to use it because I'm going with the Broncos against the Jets. I'm doing that thing where you're not picking the great team. I'm
You're
doing
picking
that
the
thing
team
where
that
you pick
plays.
the team that plays the Jets. And that has backfired on me before.
I did that a couple years ago with the Raiders, and they lost the Chiefs, or they lost. They beat the Chiefs and cost me.
So I'm going with the Cardinals. They play the Jaguars this week in Jacksonville. Of course, this will probably be the week that the Jacksonville Jaguars right the ship. But honestly, all 3 of us are a little bit more fishy than I think they've been the last couple weeks, even though Cody had a scare Monday night for a minute.
I think the Browns are a pretty safe pick, and if I hadn't already used them, I'd probably go with them.
I don't think starting the Browns against a quarterback that nobody's seen is a good idea, but I think that's a scary situation.
Bears do have a good defense.
Yeah, the Bears
And
are
if
not
you-
as bad as they look.
if you
Andy
make
Dalton
the-
is probably their biggest weakness.
Making the Browns one-dimensional is how you beat them. So
I apparently glossed over the Cardinals Jaguars because when you said Cards over the Jaguars, I was like, oh, I probably should have picked that one, but I'm sticking with it. Browns all the way.
All right. You guys have anything else you want to touch on?
Yes. Tune in to our TikTok. Even though we don't gamble because we live in Missouri, Tyler gave out a 9-game parlay.
9-team parlay.
9-team parlay that we would have hit on had we gambled. And that was a big hit. That was his suggestion for the week. And then our stone cold pick of the century of the week for week 2 was the Bills over the Dolphins, and they won 35-0. So if you're looking for one game,
3.
yeah, if you're looking for one game that's your stone cold pick of the century of the week, tune in. We'll do it weekly. One game. It's a guaranteed lock.
All right. So as always, thank you guys for listening. Hopefully, I'm assuming Carl will be back next week. There shouldn't be any reason why he wouldn't be. Appreciate all the listeners. Appreciate everyone who's subscribed. If you haven't subscribed and you're listening, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out. Makes us feel good about ourselves. Make sure you give us a like on Facebook, share it on Facebook so you can get more listeners. And make sure you tell your grandma.